Do not mistake what is unfolding today for an ordinary lunar event, because the moment you are living through carries far greater weight than most people will ever realize. Before this day is over, something inside you will begin demanding an answer that can no longer be postponed. Whether you have consciously acknowledged it or not, your life has already arrived at a decisive intersection, and every emotional signal you have been receiving has been pointing toward this exact moment. Today, July 21st, marks one of the most emotionally charged and transformational astrological thresholds of the entire year. The first quarter moon rises at 28 degrees of Libra, and its purpose is not to comfort you. Its purpose is to confront you. It arrives like an invisible mirror placed directly in front of your soul, reflecting every imbalance you've accepted, every compromise you convinced yourself was harmless, every relationship where you quietly abandoned pieces of your own truth in exchange for temporary peace. You may have tried to ignore these feelings, hoping they would fade with time, but the sky is no longer supporting avoidance. Something is reaching its point of decision, and on some level your heart has already recognized that reality before your mind has found the words to describe it. Perhaps you have noticed an unusual tightness in your chest, a lingering emotional weight that seems impossible to explain, or an exhausting inner dialogue that keeps returning to the same unanswered question. Maybe you keep replaying a conversation that already happened, or imagining one that has not yet taken place. You wonder why you cannot let it go, yet every attempt to distract yourself only seems to make the feeling stronger. None of these experiences are accidental. They are reflections of an inner process synchronized with the movement of the heavens. The universe is quietly narrowing your options, urging you toward a choice that has been waiting beneath the surface for much longer than you realize. The opportunity to respond with awareness is becoming smaller with every passing hour. Later, there is one specific astrological reason why this emotional heaviness feels almost physical, as though your body understands a truth your conscious thoughts have not fully accepted yet. That explanation changes everything once you see it, so remain with me until we reach that point. Before we uncover it, however, you need to understand why the next 48 hours possess the power to redirect the future of your closest relationships in ways that may last far beyond this week. Most people will experience today's pressure without ever recognizing its source. They will notice rising emotions, unexpected tension, surprising honesty, or arguments that seem to appear out of nowhere. Some will receive confessions they never expected to hear. Others will suddenly realize they can no longer continue pretending everything is fine. Yet, without understanding the cosmic forces involved, these moments will simply feel confusing or unfortunate. You are in a position to experience something different because awareness transforms chaos into guidance. Once you recognize the pattern unfolding above you, every emotional wave begins making sense. The first quarter moon is often misunderstood because many people only see its appearance in the night sky. They look upward and think they are witnessing nothing more than another familiar phase of the lunar cycle. Astrology reveals something entirely different. This phase represents what astrologers describe as a crisis in action, the moment when thoughts, emotions, intentions, and realizations that have quietly developed since the previous new moon can no longer remain internal. They must encounter reality. They must take form through decisions, conversations, or actions that reshape the direction of your life. The story actually began on July 14th during the new moon in Cancer, the sign associated with home, emotional protection, belonging, and the deepest places of the human heart. During the days that followed, hidden feelings may have surfaced without warning. Old disappointments, forgotten hopes, silent loneliness, or a longing you struggled to explain may have begun rising into your awareness. Those emotions were not appearing by coincidence. They were seeds planted beneath the surface of your consciousness, preparing you for the moment that has now arrived. Today, the cosmos delivers a clear message. Reflection alone is no longer enough. Whatever truth has awakened within you now requires movement. What makes this particular first quarter moon exceptionally significant is its precise location at the 28th degree of Libra. Astrologers recognize the closing degrees of every zodiac sign as the anaretic degrees, a territory where urgency reaches its highest expression because the lessons of that sign have reached completion. Libra spends its journey searching for harmony, fairness, compromise, and balance. By the time the moon reaches this final degree, every possible attempt to negotiate has already been explored. Every argument has been weighed. Every perspective has been considered. The scales have carried their burden long enough. There is nothing left to analyze. The period of hesitation is over, and action becomes unavoidable. Yet the intensity does not stop there. Only 2½ hours after this first quarter moon reaches its exact alignment, the moon leaves Libra altogether and crosses into Scorpio. That brief interval is incredibly important because it represents the final opportunity for diplomacy before emotional energy changes completely. While the moon remains in Libra, there is still room for thoughtful conversation, mutual understanding, fair boundaries, and peaceful resolution. Once it enters Scorpio, however, the atmosphere transforms. Feelings deepen. Commitments become more permanent. What was previously open for discussion may become fixed. A healthy boundary can harden into an impenetrable wall. A conversation that once invited compromise may instead create consequences that cannot easily be reversed. The universe is offering only a narrow passage where fairness can still be established before emotional intensity settles into a far more enduring form. Beneath all of this exists an even larger force, influencing the entire experience, one that many people will never notice because they are focused only on the moon itself. In truth, this lunar phase acts as the ignition point for one of the most remarkable planetary configurations of the entire decade. Less than 24 hours before the first quarter moon reaches perfection, Jupiter forms an exact opposition with Pluto across the heavens. Jupiter stands in Leo, radiating confidence, creativity, generosity, visibility, and the desire to express one's authentic brilliance. Opposite it, Pluto occupies Aquarius, representing power, transformation, psychological depth, and the relentless exposure of hidden realities. Their opposition forms the central pillar of what astrologers have identified as the most significant planetary pattern of the year 2026. Its influence extends far beyond personal emotions, reaching into relationships, communities, institutions, leadership structures, and every dynamic involving influence or authority. Jupiter encourages expansion. It longs to grow, inspire, celebrate, and receive recognition for what is genuine and alive within you. Pluto has no interest in appearances. It demands complete honesty, even when that honesty feels uncomfortable. It strips away carefully constructed illusions, dismantles masks that have outlived their purpose, and exposes foundations that were never truly stable. Wherever false security has been maintaining a relationship, a role, or a system, Pluto insists that the truth emerge, so something more authentic can eventually take its place. Together, these opposing planetary forces create extraordinary pressure, not to punish you, but to reveal whether your life is being built upon authenticity or upon compromises that can no longer support the future waiting to unfold. As this energy continues developing, its deeper meaning becomes even more impossible to ignore. There comes a moment when the universe stops whispering and begins asking a question that cannot be avoided. That moment has arrived now. As Jupiter and Pluto stand directly opposite one another, their immense gravitational influence is not simply creating tension across the heavens, it is directing that pressure into every meaningful connection you have. This is not a passing emotional mood or an ordinary period of uncertainty. It is an uncompromising examination of authenticity. Every relationship, every emotional agreement, every silent promise and every role you have accepted is being placed beneath an invisible light. The question is no longer whether a relationship appears stable from the outside. The deeper question is whether it is built upon truth. Have you been honoring your own needs with the same care that you offer everyone else? Or have you slowly shaped yourself into someone more convenient, more agreeable, more acceptable, simply because conflict felt too frightening to face? Many people convince themselves that preserving peace is the same thing as creating harmony, but these planetary forces reveal the difference. Peace that requires you to abandon your own voice eventually becomes another form of imprisonment. Harmony can only exist when both people are allowed to exist as they truly are. That is exactly why the first quarter moon in Libra becomes such a powerful channel for everything Jupiter and Pluto are activating. Libra governs partnership, fairness, reciprocity, and the delicate balance between giving and receiving. As this lunar phase unfolds, all of the immense pressure generated by these larger planetary movements pours directly into your closest relationships. Every conversation feels heavier because it carries the weight of something much larger than the words being spoken. Every hesitation feels more significant because your soul recognizes that the choices made now reach far beyond the present moment. What you're experiencing is not simply the influence of the moon. The moon has become the point through which enormous transformational currents are being grounded into everyday human experience. It acts like a conductor drawing immense celestial energy into the most intimate corners of your emotional life, reshaping the very foundations upon which trust, commitment, and personal value are built. This explains why your emotional reactions have become so difficult to ignore. Long before your logical mind can organize everything into clear explanations, your body begins translating these energetic shifts into physical sensations. You may notice a persistent heaviness surrounding your heart, an unshakable restlessness, or the strange feeling of wanting to move closer to someone while simultaneously wanting to create distance. These conflicting impulses are not signs that something is wrong with you. They are evidence that your inner awareness is responding to changes your conscious thinking has not completely caught up with. The reason becomes clearer when we look at the ruler of this lunation. Libra is governed entirely by Venus, meaning every lesson carried by this first quarter moon must travel through the planet associated with love, beauty, personal values, relationships, and self-worth. Yet Venus is not expressing herself through effortless comfort at this time. She is traveling through Virgo, a sign where affection cannot survive on beautiful promises alone. Virgo asks love to demonstrate itself through consistency, responsibility, practical support, and everyday choices that reveal genuine commitment. Under this influence, words lose much of their power unless they are matched by action. Romantic ideals become secondary to observable truth. What someone repeatedly does begins speaking much louder than anything they say. However, Venus is facing far more than the demanding standards of Virgo. She is also positioned inside one of astrology's most remarkable geometric formations, the Yod, often called the finger of God. Within this rare pattern, Neptune in Aries and Pluto in Aquarius both create challenging and deeply paradoxical aspects to Venus, directing extraordinary pressure toward everything she represents. Your values, your emotional investments, your understanding of love, your perception of your own worth, and the health of your relationships all become the focal point of this concentrated celestial force. That pressure does not remain somewhere abstract in the heavens. It filters directly into your lived experience. This is why your nervous system has been responding before your thoughts can fully explain what is happening. Your body is recognizing an energetic shift before your conscious awareness has translated it into language. The tightness across your chest, the unexplained emotional intensity, the exhausting swings between attachment and distance all reflect Venus carrying the weight of this extraordinary configuration. Your inner world is adapting to frequencies that your rational mind is only beginning to recognize. The story becomes even more dramatic because Venus has also recently completed a square with Uranus, the planet associated with awakening, disruption, and sudden change. That recent aspect tells us the transformation unfolding inside your relationships is unlikely to arrive through gradual adjustment. Instead, it may appear with startling speed. A single conversation may reveal something you never noticed before. One unexpected realization may completely reverse your understanding of another person's intentions. An ordinary interaction could suddenly expose months or even years of hidden imbalance. Some people will recognize with unmistakable clarity that they had been pouring endless emotional energy into relationships where very little has ever been returned. Others will discover that what they believed was love has actually been fear, disguised as loyalty, fear of loneliness, fear of disappointing others, or fear of stepping into an unfamiliar future. For another group, the revelation moves in the opposite direction. They finally understand that the connection standing directly before them has been genuine all along, and that the only obstacle preventing happiness has been their own hesitation to trust what their heart has quietly known. Every one of these possibilities reflects the same underlying purpose. Illusion is giving way to truth. As if these developments were not already profound enough, another equally significant influence has been quietly shaping your emotional landscape beneath the surface. Mercury, the planet governing communication, perception, and thought, has remained retrograde in Cancer since late June. Now, while the first quarter moon gathers strength, Mercury has slowed almost to complete stillness as it prepares to station direct on July 23rd. Whenever a planet reaches this stationary phase, its symbolism becomes extraordinarily concentrated. It is as though all of its energy pauses, intensifies, and demands your complete attention before moving forward again. Mercury, standing nearly motionless in Cancer, has filled the past several weeks with memories that refuse to remain buried. Familiar conversations replayed inside your mind without invitation. Faces from previous chapters of your life returned unexpectedly. Emotional experiences you believed had already been resolved resurfaced with surprising force. Many people interpreted this as emotional confusion, yet it has actually been a carefully orchestrated process of excavation. Layer by layer, old conditioning has been uncovered, childhood experiences, inherited beliefs about safety, unconscious relationship patterns, and deeply rooted assumptions about what love should look like have all been rising into awareness. Whether you realized it or not, you have been uncovering the invisible blueprint that has influenced countless decisions throughout your life. This entire period has been preparing you for the choice that now stands before you. One final detail makes this timing even more extraordinary. Mercury is not only the planet governing thought and communication. Within this particular configuration, Mercury also serves as the ruler of the sign occupied by Venus. That connection means every insight Mercury has been revealing during these weeks of retrograde reflection directly supports the relational decisions Venus is now asking you to make. The emotional understanding that emerged so gradually, often through uncomfortable reflection, now becomes the wisdom required at precisely the right moment. You are beginning to distinguish genuine emotional security from mere familiarity. You are learning the difference between authentic care and obligation dressed as devotion. You are discovering what your heart truly requires, instead of repeating the expectations you inherited from others. Every memory, every realization, every difficult emotion has been quietly guiding you toward this exact crossroads, preparing you to recognize the truth that can no longer be postponed. And what comes next will reveal why that truth carries such lasting significance. Even with all of this extraordinary momentum gathering around you, the sky is offering one final piece of guidance that deserves your complete attention. The energy surrounding today is powerful enough to awaken certainty inside your heart, but certainty and timing are not always the same thing. There is an important distinction between recognizing what your soul already knows and announcing that realization to the world before every piece has settled into place. Although the first quarter moon is urging movement, Mercury remains retrograde throughout today, and that detail changes how this moment should be approached. The realization itself is ready. The emotional clarity you have been searching for has reached the surface. The inner decision that has been forming over the past several weeks has finally become visible. Deep inside, you likely already know what must change, what deserves another chance, what has reached its natural conclusion, or what truth can no longer be ignored. Yet Mercury's retrograde motion reminds you that awareness does not always require immediate declaration. There is wisdom in allowing your understanding to mature before transforming it into words that cannot be taken back. The most permanent conversations, the defining commitments, the irreversible ultimatums, and the agreements that reshape the course of your future may benefit from waiting only 2 more days, until Mercury completes its station and turns direct on July 23rd. Those 48 hours are not a delay meant to frustrate you. They are an opportunity to allow your thoughts, your emotions, and your language to move into complete alignment. Know exactly what your heart has chosen, but allow your voice to carry that truth with precision rather than urgency. Once spoken, certain words become part of the architecture of your relationships, and this particular astrology encourages thoughtful intention before those words become permanent. As the energy continues unfolding, it also becomes deeply personal, because this cardinal first quarter moon does not distribute its influence equally across every sign. While everyone will feel some measure of its intensity, 4 signs stand directly within the center of this extraordinary crossroads. Anyone with significant placements in Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn may discover that today's events become one of those defining memories. They look back on years from now as the beginning of an entirely different chapter. For Aries, the lesson begins with something far more challenging than action. Throughout your life, your instinct has been to move first, decide quickly, and trust your courage to carry you wherever the path leads. Looking backward has rarely interested you because your spirit naturally pushes toward what comes next. Yet today's sky presents something you cannot outrun. Instead of another challenge to conquer, it places a mirror directly before you. The first quarter moon activates your house of committed partnerships, while the sun shines its light into the deepest emotional foundations of your life. Suddenly, the conflict is no longer between you and the outside world. The real tension exists between your fierce commitment to independence and the undeniable awareness that balance inside one of your closest relationships has quietly disappeared. At the same time, both Neptune and Saturn continue moving through your sign, reshaping your identity in ways that may feel unfamiliar. Neptune has been gradually dissolving the emotional armor you have depended upon for years, softening edges that once felt essential for survival. Saturn, meanwhile, insists that genuine maturity requires a version of strength very different from the one you have always trusted. Charging forward, overpowering resistance, or forcing a solution through determination alone will not resolve what this moment is asking of you. The decision before you has nothing to do with victory or defeat. Instead, it asks whether you are willing to embrace the one experience that often feels most uncomfortable for Aries, true vulnerability. You are being invited into the conversation you have delayed, because honesty feels far more exposed than confidence. This is the moment to express what you genuinely need, without disguising those needs behind competition, pride, or emotional self-protection. If you have been carrying an unfair share of emotional responsibility, the imbalance can no longer remain hidden. If your attention has become so consumed by your own path that someone walking beside you has been quietly overlooked, this moon removes every comfortable justification. Beneath everything else, the universe places a single question before you. Can your greatest expression of courage become the willingness to lower your defenses instead of raising them? For Cancer, the focus shifts toward the place where your heart has always lived most deeply. The sun continues traveling through your sign, illuminating your identity, your presence, and the person you are becoming. Meanwhile, the moon applies intense pressure to your emotional foundations, your home, your family connections, and every inner structure that creates your sense of belonging. Mercury, nearly motionless as it prepares to station direct, also occupies your sign, drawing forgotten emotions back into awareness with remarkable intensity. Old wounds, unfinished conversations, lingering disappointments, and memories you believed had already faded continue returning because they still hold something important for you to understand. Few signs experience emotion as completely as Cancer. Your extraordinary sensitivity allows you to recognize feelings that others overlook, yet that same gift can become an overwhelming burden when every surrounding emotion begins feeling like your own responsibility. You have often carried the weight of other people's pain while quietly convincing yourself that your own needs could wait. You have mistaken silence for resilience, believing retreat was the same as healing, when in reality it sometimes became another way of avoiding the difficult conversations your heart desperately needed. The Libra moon refuses to let that pattern continue. It shines directly upon every imbalance within your domestic world, exposing relationships where your generosity has become expected rather than appreciated, where nurturing has slowly transformed into obligation instead of genuine choice. The decision before you is beautifully simple, although far from easy. Will you finally give voice to the truth that has remained trapped inside you for weeks, perhaps months, or even years? Will you continue believing that enduring everything without complaint is proof of love, or will you recognize that silence can become its own prison? Feeling deeply is one of your greatest gifts, but repeatedly sacrificing yourself without expressing your truth is not devotion. It is merely a pattern that no longer serves your future. This moon arrives to interrupt that cycle. If healing requires distance, allow yourself that distance. If clarity requires rest, honor that need without guilt. Place your own emotional well-being where it belongs, at the center of your choices, because you have reached a moment where caring for yourself is no longer optional. It is necessary. Then the attention turns toward Libra, where this entire celestial story becomes intensely personal. This first quarter moon unfolds within your own sign, activating your first house of identity while forming its challenging square to the sun, positioned in the area governing career, public image, and the role you present to the outside world. The pressure building inside you is not primarily created by circumstances beyond your control. It comes from the growing distance between the version of yourself that others have become comfortable expecting and the person who has quietly existed beneath years of diplomacy, accommodation, and carefully maintained balance. Harmony has always been one of your greatest strengths. You naturally seek fairness, beauty, and cooperation, often becoming the person who smooths conflict before it grows larger. Yet this same gift sometimes leads you to become so skilled at maintaining peace that you gradually lose sight of your own authentic voice. The universe is now inviting you to recognize the difference between creating genuine balance and performing a version of yourself that keeps everyone else comfortable while leaving your own truth waiting in silence. What happens next will determine whether that truth finally steps forward into the life it has been patiently waiting to live. If you pause for a moment and answer yourself with complete honesty, you may discover that the balance you have worked so hard to preserve has not always been as authentic as it appeared. Sometimes what looked like harmony was actually exhaustion. Sometimes what seemed like grace was simply silence. How often have you smiled while carrying disappointment that no one else could see? How many times have the words, "I am fine," left your lips even though your heart was quietly asking for something entirely different? Think about every occasion when you chose agreement over authenticity, because conflict felt too costly. Think about every relationship that continued, not because it nourished both people equally, but because you accepted the responsibility of keeping it together even when no one asked whether you were still able to carry that weight. These are the questions this moment places before you, and they cannot be dismissed any longer. Venus, your ruling planet, remains under extraordinary pressure within the powerful Yod formation, receiving impossible tension from Neptune in Aries, while simultaneously facing Pluto in Aquarius, with Uranus continuing to challenge her through a recent square. Together, these influences create a profound inner awakening. What is breaking apart inside you is not your ability to love. It is your willingness to sacrifice your own identity simply to preserve the appearance of peace. Something far more authentic is beginning to emerge. A version of yourself that no longer believes self-abandonment is the price of acceptance. That transformation changes everything, because today's decision is no longer centered on whether a particular relationship continues. The deeper question is whether you can continue losing yourself inside that relationship without paying an even greater cost. If a partnership, a friendship, or even the professional path you've been following requires you to hide your true nature, diminish your voice, or constantly reshape yourself to satisfy someone else's expectations, then this first quarter moon offers the momentum to acknowledge that reality with calm certainty. There is no need for dramatic confrontation or emotional spectacle. Quiet truth carries far greater strength than emotional performance ever could. On the other hand, if your relationship has been built upon genuine fairness, mutual respect, and honest reciprocity, then this same energy encourages something equally important. Stop allowing politeness to replace intimacy. Stop believing that protecting another person from your deepest feelings somehow protects the relationship itself. The strongest connections are never built upon carefully managed appearances. They are built when both people are willing to stand before one another exactly as they are. Authenticity is not a threat to real love. It is the very ground upon which lasting love is constructed. From there, the attention naturally shifts toward Capricorn, where an entirely different lesson unfolds. Capricorn, the universe is inviting you to confront a truth that has quietly followed you for much longer than you may wish to admit. This first quarter moon activates the area of your chart associated with career, achievement, reputation, and the legacy you hope to leave behind. At the same time, the sun occupies the house connected with committed partnerships and intimate relationships, creating a direct square between professional ambition and emotional connection. The tension is unmistakable. One path asks you to continue climbing higher. The other asks you to remember who has been waiting beside the mountain while you pursued the summit. You possess extraordinary endurance. Few people understand the discipline required to carry the responsibilities you willingly accept. You have built your life through persistence, structure, and determination, accomplishing things that others might have abandoned long ago. Yet every strength carries its own hidden challenge. Somewhere along your journey toward achievement, walls slowly appeared around your heart. At first, those walls felt necessary. They offered protection, stability, and control. They kept disappointment at a distance and allowed you to remain focused whenever emotions threatened to distract you. Over time, however, the same walls that once protected you also began separating you from the closeness you quietly desired. Safety gradually transformed into isolation, so gradually that you may not have noticed the difference. Saturn, your ruling planet, is currently retrograde, turning your attention inward rather than outward. The structures you have trusted for years, the routines that created order, the principles that gave your life direction, and the methods that helped you maintain control are no longer being questioned by circumstances outside of you. Instead, something within your own spirit has begun asking whether those familiar structures still support the person you are becoming. For Capricorn, the decision surrounding love may be the most demanding of all, because it requires surrendering something that has always felt essential. It asks you to allow another person closer without first calculating every possible consequence. It asks you to welcome uncertainty instead of eliminating it. It asks you to trust connection before certainty arrives. If work has quietly become a fortress where vulnerability cannot reach you, or if ambition has slowly replaced emotional intimacy because achievement feels safer than openness, then today's astrology invites a profound reckoning. Likewise, if a relationship has been steadily consuming your energy, limiting your growth, or requiring you to become smaller so another person feels more comfortable, then the changes now required are not merely emotional adjustments. They are structural transformations. Remove what can no longer support your future. Build again using honesty as the foundation rather than obligation. Only then can something stronger take shape. Everything unfolding today becomes even more significant once you understand where this lunar cycle is leading. Only 8 days from now, on July 29th, the cycle reaches its culmination with a full moon in Aquarius, and that full moon forms directly with Pluto. Its purpose is not to introduce entirely new circumstances. Instead, it shines an uncompromising light upon the decisions being made today. Every boundary you establish now, every difficult conversation you finally allow yourself to have, every commitment you embrace, and every compromise you refuse will be illuminated beneath that Aquarian full moon. Nothing remains hidden. Whatever foundation you begin constructing under today's Libra moon will soon be tested for its strength. If honesty becomes the cornerstone of your choices, the next chapter may feel surprisingly liberating because truth naturally creates freedom. If avoidance continues guiding your decisions, then the pressure waiting at the end of this lunar cycle may resemble collapse, not because the universe seeks to punish you, but because anything built upon illusion eventually struggles to remain standing. These celestial alignments are not creating suffering for its own sake. They are accelerating consequences that already existed beneath the surface, bringing them into view through one of the most remarkable planetary configurations seen in many years. Before this evening comes to an end, and the moon reaches the height of its influence, allow yourself a quiet moment without distraction. Sit with your thoughts instead of escaping them. Listen to the question that has followed you again and again, the one you have repeatedly approached only to step away from before answering. Deep inside, you already recognize what that question is. Its presence did not begin today. It has accompanied you for weeks, perhaps much longer, patiently waiting until you were finally prepared to acknowledge it without looking away. The cosmos has not arrived to place something unfamiliar into your life. It has arrived to remove every remaining excuse for ignoring what has already been true. This is why today's first quarter moon matters so profoundly. It represents the instant when the scales begin shifting toward a new direction, and the balance they ultimately find is determined not by fate alone, but by the choices you are willing to make. If you have stayed with me until this moment, I sincerely appreciate the time and attention you have shared. I hope today's exploration has offered not only insight into the extraordinary astrology unfolding around us, but also a deeper understanding of what may be awakening within your own life. If you found value in this message and would like to continue exploring future celestial events together, I invite you to subscribe and become part of this growing community. Your support truly means more than you know. I would also love to hear how these energies are showing up in your own experience, so feel free to share your thoughts or personal reflections in the comments. Until we meet again, take good care of yourself, continue listening to your inner wisdom, and I look forward to sharing the next journey through the stars with you.